Hey, how's it going? It's Keith Townsend from the CTO Advisor. I don't know if I want to call this a virtualized geek dose or CTO triple dose, quadruple dose. I'm surrounded by 3 geeks. So the CTO Advisor will try not to take too much of a pounding technically wise. We're coming to you from Las Vegas, AWS reInvent. I have the Solarwinds Geek team with me. I'm just going to call you guys the Geek team. I have the head geek and the head geek and the headiest geek. I'm going to call it. So we'll go around and introduce everyone. Patrick, start with you.
Yeah, so Patrick Hubbard. I've been at Solarwinds now for coming up on 12 years at this point, and I started as a developer and kind of came to enterprise, and now back to software actuation and reminding people that there is a way to have some better weekends by using automation and kind of helping people. While
there's no weekends. There's no weekends in IT. That doesn't happen, even with automation. And then
Thomas LaRock, also head geek with Patrick, and I've been Solarwinds technically 7 years, but I've been program analyst, database administrator, kind of a little bit of everything. How IT goes as a sysadmin, and but these days, I get to be a head geek, and it's just wonderful.
And then Colin.
Yes, thanks for having us on, by the way, Keith. Colin Yang, Solarwinds Head Geek. Been at Solarwinds 3 years in there. Before that, Office of the CTO with the Big Four, and did consulting, did evangelism, practice lead at a startup that got bought, and then joined these 2 fellas and been smiling ever since.
Full disclosure, SolarWinds has sponsored CTO Advisor content in the past. This is not a sponsored podcast, just a conversation about the show and what we've seen. This is my first reInvent.
Mine too.
Okay, and Colin? 5th. Oh my goodness. Patrick?
3rd.
So, developer background, 3rd one. What brought you to reInvent? Because you're a traditional infrastructure guy, right?
So I started out Dell, so servers, hardware, right?
Right.
Then went virtualization, evangelism, but then when I started with the startup, cloud practice leader, right? So that was my first taste of reInvent, and I've been addicted since because the energy, the amount of money that's coming into this event is insane, right?
It is insane. So a few numbers. 42,000 people, $18 billion runway with a 40% CAGR. So year over year growth, they're expecting the business to grow at 40%. So the first thing I want to get out the way, we all see each other at Patrick, my first time meeting you in person, I follow you on Twitter, but we normally meet each other at VMworld.
That's right.
And this is quite different than VMworld. VMworld has energy.
Absolutely.
But this is quite, I remarked that you could spend 2 days on the expo floor by itself. The number of solutions and partners on the show floor, just amazing. SolarWinds had a booth on the show floor. Any of you guys worked the booth?
Not technically, but we hung out there quite a bit.
Any great conversations?
Yeah, I spent a little bit of time there. It always is, right? Because this show, you're right, it is an energy machine. And it is intentionally, AWS does that for a reason. When you go back to its first year in New York, that was the whole point, was to get influencers and sort of people who be the technical leaders excited about it. But now, to your point, it's a commodity. Right. So you have that crossover between traditional enterprise, traditional on-prem. Now they've got multiple clouds. AWS is typically one of several vendors that they're working with, but they are here as much because half of their team has already made the transition, or is what we said 2 years ago. We'd say most CIOs would say sometime by 2017 we'll have 10% of our workloads, and now you look at surveys and it's more like 50% of enterprise has 25% of workload. So the deployment is always accelerated, and so they're torn in that conversation between, I still got all of my on-prem, but now I've got cloud, and now I'm dealing with containers, and now I'm dealing with orchestration and a bunch of other technologies that they weren't even thinking about. Like if you went to VMworld 3 years ago, orchestration wouldn't have been the top conversation. Right? For a little while it was SDN, and this year it was mostly orchestration.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit Solarwinds. A little bit. Not too much. A little bit. Solarwinds is in a unique position. You guys, kind of your range of customers range all the way from the smallest of businesses. So if you have IT at all, then SolarWinds is at an entry point where there's a product for you there. Absolutely. That scales all the way up. So AWS reInvent is kind of that same geography of customer.
And that's a great point. We scale with our customers. So from the one-person shop all the way until the global, the G5 companies, right?
Right.
Because we're fundamental in the problems that we address for our customer base, and that's monitoring with discipline across the entire full stack. So that's why we can touch the one-person shop and still bring a lot of value for those enterprises in there.
So I lied. We're going to talk about SolarWinds a bit because you guys I invited you guys over for the conversation for a reason, and that is you guys are traditional IT in a sense. You still have customers who
deep roots in traditional.
Yeah. So you're not traditional IT present. You have roots in traditional IT. So as an organization, you've had to make the transition from, okay, I'm helping people who are maintaining their own infrastructure to helping people maintain their environment in the cloud, and then people in between that have a foot in both worlds, something that we kind of call hybrid IT. I did an ebook for SolarWinds on hybrid IT. Talk to us about that journey and take me through a typical customer journey who goes from, you know what, all of my stuff is on-prem to, oh my God, I just got a P1 ticket because S3 failed and I had no idea that we had stuff in S3.
Mr. LaRock, you haven't spoken. So
well, no, I haven't. Patrick probably knows more about the journey, but I can speak to that company thing, I think. And to me, it's all about when did you make your entry point. So if you're a company who made an entry point and you didn't think of yourself as an early adopter, but maybe you were probably in that set of people that tried to get stuff into the cloud and it failed.
Right.
Yeah, and so now you maybe have a little negative feeling about the cloud, so you're still a little hesitant to it. But if you weren't that early adopter, if you came in that next wave after the early adopters' failures and you learned from that, you probably had a little bit more success. And if you are a company that has really just started, then cloud is something you've already known. There's a really good chance that, even though you might not think you're cloud, but you're using O365. Mm-hmm. Or like you said, somebody spun up something in S3 and it suddenly became mission critical and you knew nothing about it.
Yeah, I think Pat Gelsinger at the last VMworld said that their survey, average customer, had 8 different cloud partners.
Yeah.
Not products,
no,
but 8 different cloud partners.
Yeah.
So as we're transitioning to kind of this, IT is the gatekeeper of technology, and we're creating service catalogs, and we're divvying out like porridge IT and technology capability to the enterprise being able to consume it directly, and then get into a situation where they find, oh wait, hold on, I can't do this by myself. I need IT's help. What is the help? What is the number one thing that IT departments are coming back and asking for?
So on that point, I found it funny in Warner's keynote today, right? He talked about change management, right? Mm-hmm. And how builders or developers, as builders as AWS calls them, that's going to be their challenge, and AWS is going to help them with change management. And my first thought was CMDB. Ops folks already have this, so welcome back.
Yeah, I interviewed BMC on. I think they even mentioned BMC on the stage, but I had BMC as an interview, and one of the first things they talked about is discovery. Like, you got to know what you have before you can do anything.
Yep. And so to that point, I think having a conversation. How do you break that? It's the same way IT pros break issues that they run into, and that's breaking down silos. And you got to cut across all those stacks. It's just that some of these stacks are owned by different providers,
yeah,
and they're outside your org, and you have to negotiate those pieces. Sometimes the only leverage you got are terms and conditions and SLAs that you can, leverage against
Yeah, you
said
can't.
providers.
You don't have the same knobs like in the data center. If Tom came to you and said, Keith, I'm not getting enough. My reads are just too slow. I can go in there, pop in some more disk, and magically faster, more IOPS, more reads.
Well, there's another thing too where I think sometimes developers will sort of criticize ops for saying, well, you're always telling me it's too complicated, or you're too inflexible and you can't be agile. But there's sort of that new and shiny versus old thought, right? And so now we're seeing cloud implementations that are old enough, that have been around long enough, that that thing where when the developer comes by and taps you on the shoulder when you're in ops and says, "Hey, how's it going?" Two years later, that doesn't happen. So now you're seeing a lot more integration also between what were atomic standalone projects that were maybe sponsored by a CXO, sort of like almost CEO blessed rogue IT, right?
Yeah.
And so now they're integrating more and more systems, and to your point, a lot of them are disparate, multi-cloud, and discovering that, oh, well, as a developer, I have a set of requirements and an expectation of scope and overall circumference of the complexity of this application, and now it's beginning to grow out. And Ops has a lot of rich experience with dealing with what does an app look like 3 years, 5 years, 10 years out with multiple layers of integration that were never planned at the time that those were created. And that's something that developers can actually learn from, and we're finding a lot of times that the developers will come to Ops and say, hey, we'd like for you to help us. So it's a little bit less adversarial than it maybe has been a couple of years ago.
So let's switch over to announcements. What were the announcements from the show, or not even just announcements? What was either announcements or experiences that were the highlight of the show for you guys?
I'll tell you right now, when Werner today spent 10, 15 minutes talking about security being a shared responsibility across everybody, and it has to be your number one thing, and everything you do, you should be thinking, is this secure first? To me was, I just, thank you, because I feel security has always come second to functionality. And the business...
Just leave the S3 buckets open to everyone to read.
Like you were just saying, though, you were talking about the rogue IT. I mean, the business and the end users don't care what magic happens. They don't care how you got the job done.
Right.
And if it's a mess back there, we're the ones that usually have to clean up the mess, but they don't care.
Yeah, I usually tell my service providers, I don't care if you have 30 people in the background typing code to deliver the change that we put in. I don't care. I just want the result.
And so that functionality and that business driver always has trumped security traditionally. But with every passing day, week, month, with every breach that comes up, and with every breach that's handled incredibly poorly. Breaches are an opportunity for you to shine in how you handle it and take responsibility, or for you to completely bury your company in how you handle it and shed responsibility. So for him Amazon's a huge market. For him to stand in front of that market and say security should be a focus was a great message to send. I'm hoping it gets received.
Patrick, what about you?
Well, to kind of dovetail on that, it's interesting. The first real wake up there was deciding that enterprise needs machine learning for dummies, right? Oh, this is too complicated. Practitioners don't know what to do with it, so we're going to simplify that. But as a metaphor for getting people to adopt managed services in general, right? And I think there were a couple of different presentations where he basically would show the before and after, build it yourself, or use managed services version of it. And one of the things that I'm really excited about, and especially from a security perspective, is that there is, whether it's traditional monitoring or it's telemetry, or to Warner's point about when he's talking about building out your innovation architecture, like most companies don't even have an area where they have telematics where you can even programmatically look at the data and the processes that you're executing. Are you actually delighting users or not? But there's an opportunity with all of this that cloud presents to get people to think about injecting security at the design level instead of the way we normally do it, which is first you buy or build the app, then you find infrastructure to run it on, and then maybe you've got a little bit of budget left for monitoring, and then way down at the end there's security. And instead, making the statement that everyone is a security engineer, that we're moving too fast to finally move that forward is fundamental to IT continuing, because sooner or later we get a point where we cannot continue to accelerate. We cannot move fast because the risk to the business, the real business risk, not regulatory compliance or something else that's obscure, but losing $1 billion of corporate value as a result of a security mistake, that eventually will force innovation speed to hit a plateau at some point.
So security is a big deal.
Oh my God.
So I have a different take.
Okay.
Security is important, but mine's less on the technical announcements, the feature set announcements that came, because there were plenty to go through. But my most poignant moment was during Warner's keynote. The fact that we had so many distinguished female engineers come to the stage and own it. I mean, from Nora Jones to Abby Fuller to the young lady who was, I forget her name, the senior engineer from Amazon who did the demo where Warner ordered 2 pizzas and beer in there. I mean, they were distinguished, skilled, and they articulated complexities simply, and it was fabulously done by that was the biggest point to me, because usually conferences will say, "Oh, women in tech,"
Yeah, and then they'll show out somebody from marketing.
Yep.
Which I'm a marketer, so I don't mind that.
Right.
But that there are examples of women that
right?
do.
It's just like, hey, this is an SVP or a general manager, and
But I was going to say, I love the way that he threw the challenge down, right? Because in his typical Warner fashion, they came out, all the demos were amazing, and he made the statement, which is, some people say it's hard to find female rock stars in technology. I didn't have any problem with that, right? Which is, you shouldn't either. Like, you should be looking. Like, we as an industry should be looking.
Yeah, I would love to see that same diversity and racial diversity as well. There are plenty of talented humans are pretty amazing people, and no matter where they're from, what gender, they are pretty smart. So I missed that part of the keynote. Unfortunately, I was talking to a bunch of suits, and I think that's the thing that I found most interesting about the show. With 42,000 attendees, anywhere from 42 to 45,000 are the numbers that I've heard, is that all of these people aren't necessarily IT, and they're not even necessarily developers. They are people looking to build stuff and get technologies solved. What I've said in the past, and I think this show has started to materialize it, is IT is going to get to the point where a IT staff is no longer needed. It is. I don't need a. When you look at, and I think that's Amazon's goal. Jassy got on stage and said that they don't build technologies because they're cool. They build technologies because they solve problems.
Right.
And at the end of the day, if you make the technology as simple as possible, which is not an easy thing to do. You guys are in the business of creating technology and software. It is not easy to make it simple to use. That's just the reality today. Amazon is pushing the envelope and making software, not just software, but infrastructure. When I first spun up my first VPC in AWS, I'm thinking, oh my God, this would have took me 6 months to build, from procurement to provisioning to QA and deployment and configuration. I did it in a matter of minutes. And I think that is the thing that I didn't expect, is to see so many business users at the conference who I interviewed that had nothing to do with technology in general. They're builders. They consume these services. They don't know what it took to build a serverless Aurora. Don't even care. They just want to consume the database.
So you talked earlier about there being a difference between VMworld and reInvent, and so you just basically articulated exactly what the difference is. You call it builders, however you want to call it. So first of all, Amazon's really an online bookstore that has now grown into being an infrastructure. I know. I was at an event that was run by an online bookstore. It had 42,000 people here.
We went to the profitable part of the company.
Right. It's just that they are an infrastructure conference. Look at everything they offer. They started with books, and now they're doing storage and everything else and all the services that come with it. And it's a wonderful ecosystem that they have built in 20 plus years. It's an amazing thing. So an event like VMworld is really for the people that are using VMware technology. And there's, what do they get, 10, 15,000 people at their event. It's still a sizable event.
Yeah, I think it's 23,000.
Right.
But even with 23,000, 42,000 people
Right.
is almost twice that number.
It's all walks of IT life. It's a crossover of the people that are doing virtualization and the people that need the orchestration and the people that just want to write the business logic. So yeah, you get a big net, right? You cast a big net for an event like this.
See, the comment piece, I just wanted to add to Tom's piece there. You had asked why it resonates with a lot of folks, right? It resonates with a lot of industries from retail to fintech and so forth, because AWS has reduced it to the lowest common denominator, made it easy to self-service the services that they provide, right? And they're going towards the goal of providing services that are frictionless to consume, which means that we may be high-tech, and our colleagues and friends in industry, they're building wonderful widgets with this technology, but your Domino's, your Pizza Huts, they're building the mobile app so that they can get consumers to eat more pizza.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if they leverage the tools the services that AWS provides them, their path to getting that app out has just shortened, because they don't have to do what you talked about: procure, buy, provision, and then set up all those pieces. They can set up functions.
They just want to build. They just want to solve business problems. So with that, we'll wrap up. I would love to have talked to you guys about the role of monitoring in all of that. There was a theme on the show floor of the expo floor. The big booths were from the monitoring companies, and that is something to definitely dive into. But until then, if people want to find out more about what SolarWinds is doing and what you guys are doing individually, where can they start finding you online, Patrick?
Well, I mean, obviously, Solarwinds.com is a great place to start. At this event, we had a lot of people that were looking at our new cloud product, which is AppOptics. So that's combined APM plus infrastructure monitoring, and I mean, it's really fun to play with. So that's appoptics.com. You can check that out. Our user community, if you're on the enterprise side, that's whack.com. And then we're all over
lab.solarwinds.com.
The lower third.
Lab.solarwinds.com.
Yes.
Yeah, we're 4 years into that now.
And then also blackcat.com has some of our industry talks with some of our industry friends. So you'll get to hear from folks like DataChip, Karen Lopez, Stephen Foskett.
Oh, you said data chick. I'm like, Karen, you've changed.
Yes.
But okay, now I understand. Okay. All right, and Twitter handles.
Fervent Geek.
SQL Rockstar.
Kong Yang.
And I'm at CTO Advisor on Twitter. You can find this and other great content, thectoadvisor.com, and I'll probably end up publishing this as a podcast because we went a little long. And that's okay, because it was a great conversation.
Yeah.
All right, talk to you guys next CTO Dose.
Thank you.
Travis.